can you give the viewers a little nugget of what you were actually presenting to this packed audience here in Westminster?
I was talking about extreme weather events, how they're rapidly increasing all over the world, how they're increasing much faster than climate models predict, so faster than we expected, and they're causing severe impacts.
They're causing severe impact in developing countries, but you were making it clear that there are severe impacts underway, happening even in a country like the United Kingdom, in the relatively balmy conditions of the Northern Europe. People should be a little bit worried about this. If not a little bit worried, they can be terrified as well, because I was terrified listening to it.
We often don't think that extreme events and global warming are going to affect us as much in a rich nation like the UK, but actually we can see that there have been so many flood events in the last few winters. We have proven that winter rainfall has increased by about 10% since 1980, and that's solely down to fossil fuel use and that warmer atmosphere. And that's predisposing us to more winter floods. And at the same time, we're seeing heat waves, we're seeing properties that aren't adapted to that kind of heat. And wildfires are suddenly a problem as well. You know, we've had these huge wildfires this year in the UK. It's a growing issue, these collectively severe weather events that happen in the UK and elsewhere in the world that cause impacts in the UK as well.
We have to cut our emissions. And again, I was glad to see that scientists made it absolutely clear that we need leaders, right, to do this, right? Yes, we are a relatively small number of emissions if you add up to the world, but we all have to act in concert, right, all the nations of the world, and support the poorer countries in their efforts to do it as well. But I think it's important that right now people need to know we need to build resilience into our communities and countries with also a sense of urgency. Would that be your take on this?
Oh yeah, and it's not just my take. The Committee on Climate Change has said repeatedly that we need to be more resilient in the UK, and this gap in what we call adaptation, which is basically building resilience to these extreme weather events, that's widening every year. So every time they produce a report, the government has to have a response. They produce an adaptation plan, and then we assess it again. And they find that they haven't delivered. You know, there's lots of planning goes on, but not much delivery and not much investment in that resilience that we actually need. And what that means is that when storms happen, our infrastructure fails. You know, transport systems go down, electricity goes down. That affects pumping stations for water sometimes in rural areas. There's no water, no communications, no transport, and this cascading impacts impact local communities.
And our cities are not really designed to deal with these extreme heats as well, and means people are extremely vulnerable if they're out and about, just say shopping, with more extreme heat days. I know Paris, I think, was installing tons of water fountains around the town, but also trees are important. We need to protect our cities, yeah?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, there's lots of cities in southern Europe that already have very effective heat plans. You know, Barcelona, for example, when there's very big heat events, which they have all the time, they also have very big flood events nowadays as well. But they suggest that citizens go to shopping centres where there's air conditioning, for example. I'm sure that's going to be something that happens in the UK at some point soon. But the other thing we need to be thinking about is how do we bring nature back into our cities, right? Parks actually provide cooling effect, so that you know they provide a cooling effect, but they also provide a sponge for flooding as well. So they absorb more rainfall than obviously our urban surfaces, and they reduce the amount of flooding we experience. So we need to think much more about how we work with nature rather than against nature in actually managing some of these issues.
One of the calls is for the national broadcasters in Britain to actually take this issue seriously, climate change, both the cutting of emissions but also the building of resilience in our societies and whatever cities. You obviously endorse that. What is the other step? Should other countries be having national emergency briefings as well? Should this become a standard feature of life in all communities and countries in the world?
Absolutely. I think the Netherlands has already had something like this just a few weeks ago, actually. I think that what's important as well, though, is it doesn't stop here. So, you know, other countries need these types of events. But we need more than this in the UK, right? This is just the start. Actually, we need an education campaign. We need a public education campaign, but we also need something in schools as well. The curriculum is incredibly outdated. Children aren't learning about these issues in their education, but they're really worried. There's massive mental health issues. The journalists need to learn more about climate change and also, the sorts of issues we talked about today, and really how can they tell the public more about this, and how do they become more informed as well. So it's not just about having one briefing, it's about basically keeping on that dialogue and that education and building that greater resilience and reducing our emissions as well.
So we don't have Time TV, who I represent. We've been running a campaign called Make Science Great Again in the face of what seems to be a big lot of blowback, maybe from the fossil fuel industry, probably from the fuel industry, disinformation, populist politicians using climate science in all kinds of weird ways for their own ends. And we'd like to give you a cap. It's designed to be provocative because a certain big populist politician, seems to think he owns the colour red. He doesn't own the colour red, so we can take the colour red back. And as for science, you can't play fast and loose with peer-reviewed science, so we're going to make it great again against those who would like to diminish science. So that's your gift, and I hope you treasure it. There's got to be some positive bits about having a meeting like this. Very nice to meet. We'll take a quick on-camera thing.